Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming at 8 o'clock on a Friday morning. My name is Avi Kitwar. I'm an Advanced Endoscopy Fellow here at BI, and I'd like to welcome you all here. As a member of the AGA Young GI and Training Committee, we conceived this idea of having these regional workshops to give fellows an idea about what life is really like as an attending. So we want this to be fun, interactive, informative, ask lots of questions. Byron Vaughn and Adam Shafitz are co-directing it here, and I'd like to introduce Adam to come and say a quick introduction.
Very quick. We're going to try to keep on time. All right, I want to thank you all for coming, and I'm sure some more of you will trickle in, knowing the fellows' tendency for being on time. I think we have an exciting agenda today. I actually wish this was something they had more of, or at least maybe I knew of when I was a fellow, and I know Avi is actually now into his 5th year of fellowship. He was just waiting to have this before he felt he was ready to move on and graduate. If you look at the agenda, we have a number of different people coming in to really touch on the different types of careers that are possible for you, and then we'll go into some nitty-gritty about compliance, the contracts. Very excited, actually. If it's an AGA, you have to bring in the president of the AGA to speak. So we have John Allen here. Very excited to speak on healthcare reform and how that's potentially going to impact us. And then it's not at all. We'll end with Sanjeev Chopra, and I will say, if any of you haven't heard him speak, I would definitely try to hang around to hear him at the end. Good. Special thanks to the people at the AGA for helping to put this together. Judy out front, we could never do this without her. She's been indispensable. Avi and Byron as well. And again, this is, as Avi said, this is for you guys. Please feel free to ask questions as you want chance to the panel at the end, mingling between, sort of get people, ask them questions. I think, you know, even just knowing Chris, his sort of path is interesting. He'll tell you about that. You know, John's as well, academic, then private for a while, then it's, you know, so I think that there's people here with a good perspective on different careers. And again, whatever you choose to do, you choose what's best for you, what makes you happy, and just remember your sort of career is just one part of the overall life. So. All right. Avi, you introduce Chin, and then we'll get going.
Sure. So I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Chin Her. He's an associate professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School and director of GI Health Outcomes Research at MGH. Dr. Her received his bachelor's degree from Columbia University, his MD, MPH from Johns Hopkins, where he was also an internal medicine resident. He was a fellow in GI actually at BIDMC, and is before joining faculty at MGH. His areas of clinical research and clinical interest include GERD, Barrett's esophagus, esophageal adenocarcinoma, as well as GI cancer screening. His research interests include outcomes research, specifically technology assessment with a focus on decision analysis and disease modeling. He will be speaking today on a career in gastroenterology, an academic perspective, and we are happy to have him here today.
Yeah, I just want to thank the course organizers for their efforts, and I have some stories about Adam in Korea if you ever want to hear them. So I want to make sure that I leave time for the other speakers, but this is a presentation outline. I do want to say up front, I have a slide about this later, but although I'm supposed to cover academic GI medicine, my perspective is definitely more from a research perspective, and I think there's a breadth of academia, including clinician educator track as well as now QI, and fortunately we have Dr. Allen to share about that. But so my perspective is definitely more from a research perspective. Also, I think many, and I don't know if I go into this explicitly, I go into my schedule, and a lot of it is more of a, although I'm more of a clinical and public health type researcher, because I live in the world of the NIH and I'm fortunate to have some NIH funding, it's much more, my day-to-day in some ways looks much more like a bench or translational researcher. And I think that can look very different if you're a clinical researcher. So I just wanted to say that up front. I wanted to start with a little bit of a personal life story, and I don't think this is just me trying to be cathartic and make myself cry or anything like that. But I think at minimum it's of interest, and part of my agenda is to help you to start thinking about yourself, even if I'm very different than your personal experience. So that's my agenda. I wanted to go over my current career in life, and then talk about different academic pathways and with some conclusions. But as Adam said, everybody is different, and everyone has their own path, so to speak. So this is what I do. I do health outcomes or decision analysis. So this is a classic. Let's say there's a 50-year-old female, and she is diagnosed with early breast cancer. This is a question that a lot of decision aid theory or decision making is rooted in. Lumpectomy with radiation versus mastectomy. And are people familiar with this? I know we're not breast cancer surgeons here or medical oncologists, but this is a classic, and I remember this even from way back. And the balance here, of course, is we're at a point of something called clinical equipoise, where the data on traditional endpoints such as survival are not clear whether radical mastectomy actually prolongs survival or lowers the rate of recurrence. There's a little itty-bitty hint of it, though, right? If you look at the survival curve, there may be some separation, but you have to kind of look very hard and stare at it. So lumpectomy and radiation makes a lot of sense, but ultimately I think we as physicians kind of leave that choice to the patient to kind of struggle with this. Do you want mastectomy, or do you want the less conservative? And ultimately, especially in a point of clinical equipoise, when there's no survival difference, it really is based on the patient's values and preferences, right? So this is a classic preference-sensitive decision. So lumpectomy, if you're more concerned about what your body looks like afterwards, obviously the quality of life, disfigurement issues, and mastectomy, if you're really concerned and you want to do everything possible, even though there's no good data, to minimize recurrence rate, right? So that's I hope the analogy makes sense. This is my analogy for along the lines of Dr. Chaffetz, that sometimes there is no right answer, right? But there may be a better decision for you as an individual. But so much of it is rooted in your personal values, preference, and perhaps even philosophies and moral views. So normally in these contexts we don't talk about your view, but so that's why I think it's important to talk a little bit about personal values and where they come from. So with that, personal life story, and again, this is new to me. I feel a little out about it, but this is my question to myself as I prepared for this, and my question to you. Why did you pursue medicine? Because I'm not so old, but I graduated from medical school in '95, so almost 20 years ago. But I thought back, and I'm going to go through some different reasons. Help people, altruism. Financial, both salary but also job security. Prestige, standing in society, respect. Intellectual stimulation. And then quality of life. And again, I'm not making any moral judgment on this, but when I was in medical school in the early 90s, I don't think people really talked about quality of life. But I think in this day and age, this is definitely a much larger issue. And again, no judgment on it. And I think we don't have any emergency medicine doctors here. But I think the emergence of emergency room medicine. I want to work 3 days a week so that I can rock climb the other 4 days. This is a very prevalent theme in society, I believe. So these are the 5 reasons. And again, I think these are all true. And I think we're fortunate in our fields to be able to do a lot of this. Well, for me, this has not been an issue, and I think my quality of life could be better. But these other 4 things, and in different phases of my 20 years, the different priorities kind of come to the forefront, or you come back to them, all 4 of them. So I'm not going to say, when I was and I'll get into this in my next slide, when I was a young lad, I think it was all one. And then you realize, like, your parents were kind of right. Like financial job security is not so bad when your friends on Wall Street got laid off with the Lehman crash, right? So anyway, so again, but something to think about. So this is my personal timeline. Again, My experience could be very different than yours, but it helped me to kind of see where I came from and maybe where I'm going. And then I also wanted to, I'm 45, but people are living longer, and if I'm fortunate and I live a long life, it's amazing. It's much more common even to have more than one career in your life. So it's another, I'll get to that, like a long time horizon perspective even on careers and decision making. So this is a little embarrassing, but why did I go into medicine? The summer before my 8th grade, we did a family trip to Yellowstone Park. I loved it. I was kind of into geology. I like cracking rocks and seeing what was inside and stuff. So I got the ultimate geology trip. And there was a geology person, was also a park ranger who talked a lot about the geologic history of Yellowstone Park. I remember I was all pumped up, and I told my dad, I want to be a geologist. And he just, this is okay for the other non-Westerner, people from the cultures. Maybe this will connect with you a little more. My dad just looked at me and said, "No." So you're going to be a doctor. So I guess that was it. So that's, in some ways, this is embarrassing. This is why I initially became a doctor. Okay. So undergrad, before my senior year, I went on a church-related service trip to South Africa. We did a lot of Habitat for Humanity type stuff. We built a home for a refugee, stuff like that. But I got the opportunity to visit Baragwanath Hospital in South Africa, which is the largest. It's in Soweto, right outside Johannesburg. And I got to see, for the first time growing up in suburban experience, malnutrition. And I kind of vowed, not externally, that I was going to do international health. Back then it was called international health, not global health, to make an impact and help people like the kids I saw with malnutrition. So flash ahead, medical school. I started medical school at Johns Hopkins, and then I decided, okay, I'm going to kind of keep this commitment to back then again international health. So in between my 3rd and 4th year, I took a year off to do an MPH, and I was going to focus on international health. I was really, again, without getting too personal, I was really burned out in med school, so in some ways I just needed a break. So, back then people didn't take time off before med school. So this was kind of like my break. So the first semester of MPH school, I took Intro to International Health, and I just realized I couldn't do it. It was there's no way I could do international health. It was too hard. It was people tell these very depressing stories about how they set up programs in different continents, and they died within a year once the funding ran out. And I was already kind of a little blue and didn't help. So I just kind of turned that degree into a epidemiology biostats clinical research degree. So at the end of it, I remember, so I kind of retooled and said, I want to do general internal medicine. I remember in my internal medicine residency application, my essay, I talked about how I wanted to do general academic medicine because there's a need for primary care, and how I wanted to do academic research. So then, then of course I rotated through GI and second year residence, and I said, this is great. How does this fit into, let's go all the way back to global health and the need for PCPs? Well, I don't know what to say, but I'm going to do GI. I like it. So then when I applied for GI fellowship application, I remember I met with Kieran and Tom Lamont, the whole crowd, Tony Lumbo, the BI crowd. My application said I did an MPH. I want to be a clinical researcher. And I remember Kieran was the first one that said, have you ever heard of health outcomes, Chin? So it's kind of continuing in the story. And part of the story is, anyway, I think you guys are smart enough to figure out where I'm going with this. Okay, so finally, with second year of fellowship, I'm looking for research. I ended up hooking up with Norm Nishioka, who did endoscopic research in Barrett's. I tried to do that for about 3 months. Nothing worked. I tried 6 different projects comparing OCT and EUS, looking at layers of the esophagus. I have some experience with that. Carrying esophagi specimens through the tunnels of MGH. None of it worked. And Norm said to me, Chin, we have a good health outcomes group at Mass General. You should really consider working with them and building a simulation model of Barrett's. So That was 2000, and that's still what I do. I connected with a great group. I was fortunate to follow the kind of NIH pathway, get a K grant, and able to transition to an R1. So that's kind of my personal life story. Now, again, this story from the beginning, going back to 8th grade, might be very different than yours, but I encourage you to, minimum, this is stimulating some neuronal pathways, thinking about why you chose to go to medicine, and that's my agenda. I will say one other thing. This whole thing about altruism and idealism of what we thought, and the world is a tough place, and it tries to squeeze all the idealism out of you, doesn't it? I think that's true. You need to be realistic. However, for example, this is an example of a longer-term career and many things coming full circle over longer periods of time. This international health desire, passion, calling, if you will, I'm getting back into it, and I've discussed with Ruma a little bit. I've been able to go to China a couple times with some endoscopic research and screening in esophageal cancer, and I'm hoping to be able to go to Kenya, where there's a lot of esophageal squamous cell, actually at a missionary hospital. So this is, you don't know what's going to happen, because back then in 1993 when I did my million pages, I'm done, but it's coming back 20 years later. I don't know where I'm going to end up, but I have also additional interests in nonprofit work, and as I said, people live a lot longer, relatively longer these days. I'm going to try to watch my cholesterol if I'm fortunate and live long enough. I hope to have a second career someday. That's really what it comes down to. And I think we're fortunate in academic medicine where we have the opportunity to be able to kind of, there's such breadth, not just academic medicine, but in medicine, there's such breadth that you can have so many different experiences. And Dr. Allen will get into this, but, and I think the world's changing as well, that doesn't have to be all at once. It used to be if you left research you could never come back. That still might be true in bench research more so, but I don't think that's, I think the rules are changing. Okay, so this is my current schedule, and again, I said this is more of a, even though I'm more of a clinical or public health researcher, this looks more probably closer to a basic or translational researcher. I'm what the NIH calls 30% effort, 70% covered by the NIH or research funds, so 30% of my effort. And I do 1.5 days of clinical, 1 full day of endoscopy, and 1 outpatient clinical session per week. It always ends up more than that because you see patients emergently, adding in endoscopy cases with general anesthesia, et cetera. I do about 4 to 5 weekends of call per year. The MGH group has about 30 attendings, but we have 2 attendings on call because we have our endoscopy unit is open on weekends, which is atypical. And then I do about 2 weeks per year of inpatient consult service. And then I have some admin responsibility. This is just the main ones. I coordinate GI grand rounds, and I used to run the Fellows Clinical Journal Club, but I still try to go every week. And then I do some other things. I have some committee service. I'm on the formulary service. What else? There's a couple other smaller things that I do. But essentially, the rest of it is all quote-unquote protected research time. So research time. What does my research time look like? And I'm quote-unquote mid-level person. As I've become more senior, I do less time doing the research myself and more time directing research of my staff and my trainees. So I'm not in a lab, but in some ways this is more like a lab model, right? The PI is writing grants, and after a while the PI doesn't know how to run the gel anymore or how to mix the reagents. So I've gone through that transitions. I'm in a lot of lab type meetings and a lot of individual meetings, making sure my staff is doing their job. There's a lot of writing and editing, nonstop, which works out for me because I'm a better editor than a writer. So I feel like this is good. Publish or perish. Then there's a lot of grant writing. The NIH has a 4-month cycle, and I'm probably at least part of either submitting or part of a grant, 2 grants every 4 months. A lot of grant writing. And then, especially now, I'm in the NCI, the NCI World National Cancer Institute, not the DK. There's a ton of movement towards more collaborative grants. So I'm part of 2 or 3 UO1 consortia. So it's amazing how much time I spend on the telephone. And this is starting to wear on me a little bit because I'm on the phone all the time, sitting in my office on the phone. Although overall it's interesting. I mean, some of my contacts, we have a lot of connections in Seattle, and then we have another group in Erasmus University in Rotterdam. So that's 9 time zones, and it's kind of interesting trying to coordinate stuff. So that's roughly what my research time looks like. Okay. Oh, and I missed something. Right, and then traveling conferences. And then this is, I enjoy this. Going to conferences, everything from the DDW and other medical conferences, public health conferences, visiting professorships. As you get more senior, you get invited more, and that's always fun and enjoyable, as well as committees. So this grows as you get older. So in the beginning, like you're not going to be invited to be visiting professor much, but as your reputation grows, this will happen more and more, presumably. Okay, so what do I like and dislike about my academic career? And again, predominantly from a research perspective, I like the variety. I think I have, not ADD, but I like, I'm a dilettante. I like to dabble in a lot of things, and I get to do that. I get to wear many, many different hats. Even my committee service, I'm learning about formularies and things like that. It's very interesting. And related to that, I'm always learning, constantly intellectually stimulated. And then as I get older, there's new challenges. As I assume different positions of leadership, I'm forced to learn new skill sets. I used to have to do the research myself, but now I need to manage people. And they don't teach you stuff like that in medical school, do they? So it's interesting how to manage grant funds. This might not sound fun, but at minimum, it's a new challenge, and I think that appeals to me, that you're constantly having to learn to do new things and hopefully do them well. This is much bigger than I would have ever thought, autonomy. I'm talking about autonomy for schedule. Technically, Romnick's my boss, but as long as I'm keeping the grant funding in and in the black, I basically have autonomy to do essentially whatever I want with my schedule. I can theoretically go to my child's music performance at 10 o'clock and come back and make it up. I mean, I'm essentially my own boss, which is a big deal. And then finally, going back to some of the altruism, I ultimately, at the end of the day, I really believe in the mission. I believe sometimes you get caught up. All of life, all jobs are ultimately a grind at points, and sometimes you lose perspective. Like, why am I doing this? Do I really need to do another upper endoscopy? Aren't we just torturing this person who's going to die soon anyway? So there's elements of that. But at the end of the day, I believe in the mission, and this comes and goes. Sometimes I think, how many colonoscopies have I done? And then I actually estimated the number of colon cancers I prevented and the number of colon cancer deaths I prevented. And it was a nice number. It made me feel pretty good. Cons. This is just me again, but at times it can be very stressful. Part of it is, I think I can get overstimulated with the number of emails, and this is the flip side to wearing many hats and always being stimulated. It seems like my brain doesn't get a chance to relax. I also have young kids at home, and my wife is a gynecologic surgeon, so we're kind of burning all ends at the same time, it seems like. So sometimes it feels like I can just never shut down. And then grants. Overall, I know people hate writing grants. I put that as a con, but it's a love-hate. I actually think that when you write a grant and you deliver, or you're able to write a good grant, well, particularly if it gets funded, but even if it doesn't get funded, there's something very intellectually satisfying about bringing different pieces together and producing something. It's almost like an artist mindset where you feel happy with what you produced. So maybe I'm just deluding myself, but I don't think it's totally a con, but I put this as a con, because at minimum I think it causes stress about trying to find funding. And then finally, and I won't spend too much time on this because it's kind of obvious, generally there's less financial compensation. So I would say that's the biggest con, and I won't spend too much time with this. But you guys can ask questions. How's that? All right. And then I touched on this in the very beginning. Although I'm more of a clinical public health type researcher, my life probably looks more like a bench translational researcher because it follows kind of like the NIH grant model. And then there are other avenues that I don't really feel, fortunately we have Dr. Allen who's going to speak about burgeoning opportunities and quality improvement, and sounds like a little bit of his personal journey. And then there's the educational pathway, which up to more recently has never really been developed within the Harvard Medical School system, but I think in other places. I will say one thing about this, because I'm in the more traditional mind framework of you need to find your own funding, and traditionally it's been the NIH. When you're young and idealistic, you don't think about sustainability, about funding, but if you can't fund yourself, even in education or quality improvement, ultimately you have to protect your time. You have to buy your time somehow. So there need to be mechanisms. You need to think long term. Okay, so finally, this is my suggestion to you, and this ties into some of my personal stories. But think about different time horizons. You need to, as you make decisions now, you need to think short term, but both long term. And this is my my son says, I want to be a fireman when I grow up. So I don't disagree with him because I'm pretty sure he's going to change his mind. But who knows? I mean, I'm not going to tell him he can't be a fireman, although it's pretty dangerous, right? So this is a similar. I just remember the first time, and I think this most of you can relate to this. First time I drew blood successfully. I remember I held that red top in my hand. I felt the warmth of the venous blood, and I just got this high out of it. This is awesome. I drew this blood. I did it, right? 22 years later, I never want to draw blood ever again. Like if I never draw blood again, I'd be totally happy. So just. And then similarly, first time I was in the emergency room as a second-year medical student, I absolutely loved it. This is the most fascinating, stimulating place. There's blood everywhere, gunshot wounds. Never want to go to the emergency room ever again. So, I think you get the message. Sometimes, you got to think longer term. When I come into work, sometimes on my non-clinical days, I have a cup of coffee in my hand. I turn on my computer. It's pretty nice. So, okay. So finally, this is again. I love my surgery rotation, but when I thought about it, why didn't I go into surgery? I like the surgeons. I actually like the surgeon macho mentality a lot. I like the team stuff. I like the kind of military feel, for whatever reason. But I figured out that I didn't like operating that much. Maybe that's why I'm a gastroenterologist. I just liked it a little, right? So anyway, it's just something to think about. So what are some characteristics of a researcher, not necessarily an academic? And does thinking about science make you excited? Do you have a strong innate intellectual curiosity about what makes things tick? And do you enjoy delving deeply into a topic and losing yourself to the point of even a loss of the sense of passing of time? So these are some characteristics. And if not, it's kind of like my surgery. It's not worth it, maybe, if these are deep ingrained in you. Okay, so in conclusion, I'm not going to go through all this, but I did want to say, go back to the decision analysis. There's no right decision. But to think about your personal journey and some of your personal values and preference. And then, the long-term, short-term, intermediate-term thing, I shared my experience about the global health and how I'm trying to come back to it. I think that's something to consider. And then finally, I touched on some of the characteristics of perhaps a researcher. So thanks for your attention.
Thanks, Dr. We'll actually, just for the sake of time, hold some questions.